Everybody knows that the English poet John Milton is a terrible bore. His epic poem Paradise Lost, published in 1667 and over 10,000 lines long, is the bane of literature students, due to the poem's outdated Christian theology and flowery language. Reading the 20th century writer J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Lord of the Rings and much else besides, can also be a bit of a struggle. Most people would rather just watch the movie version. I mean, just look at those orcs. Don't they look awesome? This video will argue that only a fool would dismiss these two writers so easily. Milton and Tolkien produced perhaps the best written and most useful warnings about psychopathy in all of literature. Milton nailed the literary psychopath hundreds of years before the dawn of psychology. In Paradise Lost, Satan is written by Milton as such a compelling figure that generations of readers have accused Milton of having sympathy for the devil. Famously, the 19th century mystic William Blake claimed that because of the allure of Satan in the poem, Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. The earlier Romantic poets, who were never ones for reading old books too closely, adored Milton's Satan as a kind of Prometheus who rebels against divine authority for the betterment of mankind. More recently, no less a publication than The Atlantic has hailed Milton's Satan as emphatically American for his bravery and individualism. Public figures like Malcolm X, who regarded himself as a champion of truth and freedom, have also been big fans of Milton's Satan. These commentators are all suckers, or worse. The reason why Paradise Lost works is because, like all great literature, it not only reveals its main character, but also the reader's character as well. What you think about Milton's Satan says an awful lot about you. Exactly as Milton intended, Satan's psychopathic pity play is very seductive to people who don't have a strong moral compass. To pull this off, the poem recognizes an uncomfortable, or possibly even heretical, truth. That truth is that evil looks good. Milton's Satan is rather like a glamorous gangster. He is an unrepentant criminal who plays the victim, expects our indulgence, and then takes everyone down with him. With a protagonist like this, it's not surprising that responsibility is an important theme in Paradise Lost. When we think about responsibility in this poem, it's interesting to compare Milton's anti-hero with another famous Satan, Dante's in the Divine Comedy. Dante depicts Satan as an enormous beast, frozen in ice and weeping. But when Milton first describes Satan's arrival into hell, although he is in chains and on fire, Satan doesn't shed a tear. Like a true psychopath, Milton's Satan is not sorry for anything, mostly because he doesn't see anything wrong with him. Later on in the book, though, Satan does do some crying. But these are tears of self-pity, as he realizes that he and his fellow fallen angels can never get into heaven again. Satan never deals with his own role in the fall, and he prefers to play the victim of oppression. In fact, Satan's dislike of responsibility is so extreme that he even has difficulty saying the word repentance. Is there no place left for repentance? None for pardon left? None left but by submission, and that word disdain forbids me. Paradise Lost renders Satan's psychopathic thinking style beautifully. The talent of psychopaths for lying is well documented, But Milton lucidly describes the kind of distorted thinking that's been observed in psychopathy and other personality disorders. In his supreme grandiosity, Satan claims that simply by the power of his own mind, truth and lies are interchangeable, depending on what suits him at the time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. But Milton, as the narrator of the poem, is very clear that everything Satan says is a lie. But all was false and hollow, though his tongue dropped manna and could make the worse appear the better reason. This satanic twisted logic has been verified in the real-world scientific literature about high-functioning psychopaths, who are reported to reason intelligently, but without any sense of the wider consequences of their actions. In their speech patterns, psychopaths are known to talk in terms of very simple cause and effect, usually to justify their actions. But once again, Milton knows what's up. In Paradise Lost, God comments that the evil angels fell because they were tempted by their own suggestions, self-tempted, self-depraved. This makes it clear that evil is motivated internally. It's a choice, and blaming exterior forces, such as ill fortune or abuse by other more powerful people, is just another cop-out. Psychopaths also tend to overuse the past tense, saying, "I thought so," rather than "I think so," as they build narratives which carefully gloss over their own past pathological behaviour. In contrast to Satan's ornamental style of rhetoric, God in Paradise Lost doesn't waste words, and he speaks much more clearly. Rather than justifying himself like Satan does, God explains. Scientists have also found the language of psychopaths to be functional rather than emotional. Satan's big speech at the start of Paradise Lost is presented as a rhetorical discourse, an intellectual exercise. The whole spiel is presented ironically as a masterclass in persuasion, when we already know that Satan's audience are slaves to his will. Of course, psychological projection, accusing others of your own faults in order to deflect blame, is another feature of psychopathic thinking. Throughout the book, Satan accuses God of being a tyrant, like a controlling parent, which is of course exactly Satan's style. The famous phrase, "better to reign in hell than serve in heaven," is probably the best known quote from Paradise Lost. Just look at this clip from the 1997 film The Devil's Advocate, which features another example of satanic projection. It features a delightfully unhinged performance from Al Pacino, whose character is called, of course, John Milton.
He gives you this extraordinary gift, and then what does he do? I swear, for his own amusement, his own private, cosmic gag reel. He sets the rules in opposition. It's the goof of all time. Look, but don't touch. Touch, but don't taste. Taste, don't swallow. And while you're jumping from one foot to the next, what is he doing? He's laughing his sick fucking ass off. He's a tight ass. He's a sadist. He's an absentee landlord. Worship that? Never.
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, is that it?
Why not?
So, what makes Satan different from an ordinary human psychopath? What makes his psychopathy cosmic in its scale? Well, the big difference is Satan's goals. Psychopaths are known to be impulsive and have difficulty working towards long-term objectives. But Satan is willing to spend millennia, if not eternity, trying to corrupt and undo God's creation, not through open conflict with God, but through subversion. And although Satan isn't a details guy, he is able to plan his revenge like a master strategist. Many psychopaths are also known to be socially awkward. But Milton's Satan is a smooth operator who knows exactly what to say to everyone in order to corrupt them. He promises Eve that tasting the forbidden fruit will give her knowledge of good and evil, and that this knowledge will make her the equal of Adam. Of course, this is a lie by omission, as the fruit will enable her to do evil as well as good. Promising Eve equality with Adam is, of course, the perfect way to pander to her narcissism. And like the most high-functioning psychopaths, Satan can, at least outwardly, control his own behaviour. What makes his psychopathy cosmic and so dangerous is his power. Like many high-functioning psychopaths, the danger doesn't just come from Satan's words, but from his influence. Like Milton's Satan, Sauron in J.R.R. Tolkien's mythology exerts a malign influence, especially through the Ring of Power. The One Ring subverts its enemies and creates discord, not unlike Satan's style in Paradise Lost. Like Satan, Sauron rarely chooses open conflict and prefers to work through intermediaries. Going back further than the Lord of the Rings trilogy, there are more parallels. Sauron is a shapeshifter who changes his form to deceive his enemies. In Paradise Lost, Satan famously takes the form of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, although he also appears as Leviathan as well as other animals. Interestingly, in the Silmarillion, Sauron also takes the form of a snake, as well as a werewolf. This shape-shifting behaviour looks like a nod to Milton's Satan, and it hints at the psychopath's adaptability and lack of a coherent identity. Sauron is also rather fond of appearing to be physically attractive, whereas Milton's Satan is intellectually and spiritually seductive. But the real Satan figure in Tolkien's universe is not Sauron at all. It's the being known as Melkor, or Morgoth, who is Sauron's predecessor as the main antagonist in the Lord of the Rings universe. Morgoth's biography is a much closer fit to Satan's. Like Satan, he was the most trusted lieutenant of Tolkien's god figure, Eru Ilúvatar, before rebelling against his creator due to his pride. This is more important than it looks in the Lord of the Rings story that we see in the films. In the memorable battle between Gandalf and the Balrog in the Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf utters some lines that sound like nerdy garbage.
You cannot pass!
Gandalf!
I am the servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Arnor. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udun!
But actually, this speech defines who Gandalf really is. He is the keeper of the sacred fire of Eru Ilúvatar. This sacred fire is the creative spirit, or divine spark, that Morgoth seeks but cannot find. Morgoth is described as a would-be thief of the light, and this is perhaps in reference to Satan's other name, Lucifer. What this implies is that, like a psychopath, Morgoth has no creative ability of his own, and he can only distort reality. The backstory of Middle-earth and its future have some striking similarities to Milton's cosmos. In the Silmarillion, there is not only a creation myth, but also a prophecy about the end of the world. The concept of the final battle, or a kind of Armageddon, is referred to as Dagor Dagorath. In Tolkien, Morgoth will leave the void into which he has been cast, and will seek to challenge Eru Ilúvatar. Much like the final victory of the Son, Jesus Christ, that is promised in Milton's work, this is when the bad guy will finally get what's coming to him. But even despite these striking mythological parallels with Milton, it's important not to read too much Christian allegory into Tolkien's work. For sure, Tolkien was a devout Catholic, but Tolkien is on record as saying that he disliked allegory and that he much preferred history, although he did say that history could be real or imaginary. Tolkien wants the reader to interpret his writing freely, without forcing an agenda. This freedom of interpretation, surely, is the hallmark of great writers, and it's in the same spirit as Milton, who, rather than forcing his ideas on the reader, wanted to justify the ways of God to men. But what both these two great writers do is weave a tapestry of causality, in which the role of evil is fully explored. In the 21st century, we place our faith in economics and political science, and so psychopaths are simply seen as the product of historical or societal factors. Psychopathy, they would have you believe, is just a medical problem to be treated, and the concept of evil is just outdated. Nothing could be farther from the truth. What Milton and Tolkien show us is that powerful, high-functioning psychopaths not only all have the same behaviours, but these destructive behaviours are so extreme that you need a spiritual explanation to deal with them. John Milton and J.R.R. Tolkien both knew that we cannot fight evil unless we understand it first. This cosmic struggle against psychopathic evil transcends race, class, nationality, or any other way of looking at humankind. Paradise Lost and The Lord of the Rings are weapons for the endless war.